Philly gets Paul George back, but it looks like they may be without Joel Embiid because of an altercation in the locker room after a game. Plus, Gregg Popovich going to miss some time as head coach of the San Antonio Spurs. We'll tell you why today on the Locked On NBA podcast.
You are Locked On NBA, your daily NBA podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On NBA. Thanks for making us your first listen of the day. We are free. We are available wherever you get podcasts. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Subscribe to this podcast. Follow, mash the like button on YouTube. Do all of those things. And you can also start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers will get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. I'm Doug Branson, host of the Locked On Hornets podcast and your Shot Clock Sherpa, guiding you through the NBA's biggest stories. And there are a lot of big stories from this weekend with the help of Locked On's local experts. With me are two of Locked On's premier national NBA experts from the Locked On podcast, from the Locked On Nuggets podcast, I should say, and senior writer for the Action Network, Matt Moore, and from the Locked On Bulls podcast, we've got Hayes. Matt and Hayes, let's get right to it. The biggest story this weekend did not happen on the court, but in the locker room. Sixer star Joel Embiid was involved in a physical altercation with Philadelphia Inquirer writer Marcus Hayes over a column Hayes wrote that criticized Embiid for missing the start of the season and made an awkward tie-in with Embiid's late brother and son. Hayes has since removed those references from the article. Inquirer writer Gina Mizell reported that Embiid's open hand made contact with Hayes' neck and that there was a shove in that altercation. Embiid also said, quote, "You're going to see what I'm going to do to you, and I'm going to have to expletive live with the consequences," unquote. So Marcus Hayes obviously feels like a line was crossed, or he wouldn't have removed the controversial pieces of this article. And I believe he had a social media apology as well. Did it warrant this kind of response from Joel Embiid?
The physical part of the response, no, not in my opinion. Now, I do think that there should be something that a conversation should be had, especially if Joel Embiid feels like something in the article was out of bounds, especially since it ended up being removed by the writer. But the physical part of this is the biggest part that, no, you don't need to do that part. But I do believe that Joel Embiid is in his right to want to have a conversation. He just needs to control himself a little bit better emotionally when he tries to have that conversation, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think this is really tough here because it's just like it was so far out of bounds to bring in his late brother into this conversation. Like, I've been one of the most critical people online about Embiid, especially about Embiid missing games. And like, I've gone too far and apologized, but never, ever would I ever do something like that. And I do kind of feel like, look, there are certain things that when you cross those lines, people are going to react that way. So from like a should situation, I have a hard time blaming Embiid. Now, the difference here is that you're in a professional environment, you're operating as an NBA player within those confines. And the issue here is going to be for the league is any sort of fight like that is going to put other people at risk. It risks the league, it risks the team, it risks all of these types of things, as well as it puts the league in danger of other people being in a dangerous environment. That's why the league will respond the way that it will here is you simply cannot have this kind of behavior in the locker room environment. If this was happened outside of the arena, then yeah, there's probably going to be repercussions for Embiid, especially with it being a reporter. But given the circumstances, they'd be different. It happening in a locker room, however, the NBA is going to take that very serious, and I'm not going to be surprised if the suspension that he's facing is substantial.
Yeah, Hayes, do you think this ends in a suspension? And do they take into account not only the altercation itself, but the quote that I read in the introduction, the essentially seems like a threat. Like, if you do something, I'm going to respond in the future. How much will that factor into the NBA's response, do you think?
I think they're both going to factor heavily in, and I would not be surprised if Joel Embiid faces a multiple game suspension due to this at all.
Matt, this is one incident, but it's part of, I think, a larger story about the fraying of relations between media and players in the league and a changing environment in which in some situations reporters have access to the locker room, in some they don't. Where is this all heading in your mind? I mean, where do you see this? Is this going to lead to even more close relations between media and team, media and players, or will the NBA work to find some kind of resolution here?
I mean, the NBA will work to find it, but the teams and the players will continue to find ways to try and move away from that. Players don't want reporters in the locker room. They don't. And we can have that discussion. I think that's like a broader discussion we can have. And I have a lot of mixed feelings about it. But players don't want media to have access. They don't want to do media. They've never wanted to do media. They want it less. A lot of the conversation is about stuff like this, where it's like, I'm a human and I deserve to be treated as a human being. That same relationship is not always extended the other way, because in large part, think about it this way. Marcus Hayes is one writer for one publication, but he is now emblematic of quote unquote the media. And the players will respond to the idea of the media from that perspective, rather than understanding like Gina Mizell, great reporter, doesn't have any of these type of issues, works really hard to build respectful and good relationships with the players that she covers. But no, they're not going to think of Gina. They'll just think of this as the media. And there will continue to be efforts made by the players, the NBPA, and the teams to remove access. Like, I just think we're eventually going to head to less and less coverage being available, less and less access for reporters whose job really it is to be the conduit between the fans and these teams. We're going to lose that more and more based off of how these things are going.
Yeah, I think the real issue is respect from both ends, from the media to players and from players to media, and for them to both understand that there's like mutual benefit to that relationship. But when things like this happen,
but also like Marcus Hayes, like that's you're going to find reporters being upset with Hayes because this stuff is what winds up harming it. Hayes isn't a reporter. He's a columnist, but players don't make those distinctions between podcast hosts, columnists, reporters. There's no distinction made. Again, it's all just the media. So when a reporter does something like this, or a journalist, a columnist goes like this and goes out of bounds, everyone else in that media structure suffers.
All right, let's turn our attention to a return for the Philadelphia 76ers, and they're dealing with one of their superstars continuing to sit out, and Joel Embiid may have to sit out mandatory for a little bit longer now. But they may get one back in Paul George. Sources have George making his season debut tonight against the Phoenix Suns after he suffered an injury in the preseason. Here's Locked On 76ers on the impact of a PG return.
Well, I keep thinking back to that first preseason game in Minnesota where, they looked a little bit out of sorts. Even though they had PG, they still looked out of sorts until PG took over. So I think that's what we're going to see a little bit of, PG taking over, bringing the ball up, doing things to get Maxey set up, and then it's going to crack the defense. But I don't think we're going to see that real smooth transition until Embiid comes. They need other guys to do certain things. And right now, is not outside of Kelly Oubre, is not really what they're here to do. You know what I mean? So they don't have a lot of creators, and that's what they need, guys who can get their own shot. So PG is going to help, but I don't think it's going to be as smooth of a transition.
Okay, Hayes, what do you think? Keith Pompey there, by the way, host of the Locked On 76ers podcast, also works for the Philadelphia Inquirer. He doesn't think this is going to be an immediate fix, that PG into the lineup, all of a sudden Sixers, they are good again. What say you?
I mean, yeah, they're gonna have to find their balance. Like, I think when any player comes back after being out for a while, there's that acclimation period, and that's if they are on the same team that they were on last season. Like, PG's on a new team, a new balance, a new dynamic. Maxey's really, coming into his own, averaging almost 30 points a game. But I think that's why they brought PG. That's why they wanted PG, though. PG can adapt. And I think over time they're going to be fine, but it's a shot in the arm, and PG could have some big games right away. But as far as this being a well-oiled machine that just works and fits seamlessly together, if that even happens this season, it's going to take a little bit of a time. There may be some of that. You have your quarter, I have mine initially when PG comes back, but you want a player that has the talent of PG. He's a 20-point per game scorer. He can go out there and get it done. And I think that, overall, he's definitely going to help them win basketball games, but it just may be a little rocky at first.
Yeah, on the one hand, I think PG is one of the most flexible guys in terms of being able to slot them in, because he's very good at, we're going to run this for you. No problem. We need you to do this. No problem. Hey, we need you to create with the ball. Okay, I can do that. We want you running off pin downs. Can do. Like, PG's really good at being flexible. It's his versatility is one of the best things about him. However, look, Pascal Siakam got traded to the Pacers while they were on a West Coast road trip, and it was a disaster in those early couple days because the Pacers had no idea how to play with him. It takes a little while. It just does for anybody. And while this team practice with PG in preseason and play with him a little bit. They just haven't had any time with him. So you're going to see probably a rocky start here. Not going to be surprised if the Sixers drop this one tonight. I don't expect them to win this game. I think it'll probably be a few days, and then you'll start to see like, oh, Paul George kind of bounces back, and they're starting to get some momentum and rhythm with PG in the lineup.
Okay, coming up, Gregg Popovich will be missing the next few San Antonio Spurs games. We'll tell you why and how it could impact Victor Wembanyama and the Spurs' chances of continuing a little bit of momentum that they've found. That's coming up on the Locked On NBA podcast. This episode of Locked On NBA is sponsored by BetterHelp. I'd like to take a moment to thank my baby. She is my ultimate get out of doing something I don't want to do card, and I've been using it for 3 years now without fail. She also enriches my life in ways that words fail, blah, blah, blah. But this month is all about gratitude, and along with my baby, there's another person we don't get to thank enough, and that is ourselves. It's sometimes hard to remind ourselves that we are trying our best to make sense of everything, and in this crazy world, that isn't easy. Here's a reminder to send some thanks to the people in your life, including yourself. It's a little bit easier to thank yourself when you're feeling like the best version of yourself, and a great place to do that is therapy. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It is entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapist anytime for no additional charge. Let the gratitude flow with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnNBA. More Locked On NBA ahead. Thanks for making Locked On NBA your first listen every day. Your favorite NBA team has a free daily newsletter. Go to LockedOnDaily.com and subscribe to stay up to date with local expert analysis and amazing writing from Katie Heindel, who made Vince Carter cry during his retirement ceremony. I don't know. That may sell it. That may not. It was an emotional moment that she generated from VC. It was very cool to see. Mike Shearer and Locked On Fantasy Basketball tips from Josh Lloyd as well. Again, free daily newsletter from your favorite local NBA team, LockedOnDaily.com. Okay, sources tell ESPN's Shams Charania today that Spurs coach Gregg Popovich, who missed Saturday's game with an illness, will be out indefinitely, and Mitch Johnson will be the interim coach. How long will Wemby and company be without the all-time winningest coach in NBA history? Here's Locked On Spurs host Jeff Garcia with more.
The report Popovich will be out for the Spurs game tonight versus the Clippers and their next game on the road versus Houston. Again, the Spurs did not give any timetable. Reports are coming out that Popovich is okay, that all is fine, that it's not serious. And again, according to the other reports, that it is just simply a need for him to rest. He is 75 years old. And ahead of the Spurs' recent game versus Minnesota at home, assistant coach Mitch Johnson did tell everybody at the press conference pregame that Pop is fine, that life happens, that everybody has to step up, and that Popovich is okay. So all signs are pointing to nothing serious. Hope everything's good with Popovich. But for those Spurs fans out there, it looks like everything will be okay. Stick with Locked On Spurs for all updates regarding your silver and black and the status of Popovich.
Okay, so details are still developing on this story, but Matt, what's the impact on the Spurs if Pop's absence does become an extended one?
I think they'll be fine. This is the thing, is these kind of organizations that have this kind of infrastructure do fine. It's when you have coaches that are the only voice in the room and they're paranoid and they don't empower their staffs. That's not what Popovich does. And you can see this throughout every single level of the Spurs organization. Same thing with the Thunder. These types of organizations, they're prepared for these types of instances because everyone knows the game plan and everyone's on the same page. Are you possibly losing something in terms of late game management? Maybe, but I have zero doubt that they're going to be prepared to play. The game plan will be there. Mitch Johnson will do fine. I don't think there's any sort of reason to be concerned here about the Spurs in general while Pop's out.
Yeah, they'll be prepared to keep the ship afloat, and that's what you need to do in a situation like this. And they'll all be on the same page. Gregg Popovich, he has he's the best coach maybe in NBA history. Like, he has all his people prepared. They understand what to go about it, and that's one of the benefits of having an actual good organization that's ran like an organization. Something I would love to be able to talk about in Chicago, but that's a story for another day. But they'll be fine. They'll be fine.
Okay, they'll be fine right now. Do you think this incident accelerates the timeline for a conversation about a Spurs transition to a post-Pop era?
I think they're probably already having those conversations internally. We're just not probably privy to them. I'm sure that they already have a transition idea in place, or at least a framework of one to know what they're going to do when Pop decides to sell off into the sunset. So I'm sure that they already have that plan in place. We just don't know it.
Yeah, I mean, look, there were rumors about various coaches being in line to take over Pop's job. Becky Hammon was one that was mentioned. Quinn Snyder actually is a name that I've heard that was at least being considered, but those were all really speculative. And for whatever reason, Pop kind of a couple of years ago had to change of heart in terms of his career, decided to really kind of reinvest himself. And so I don't think that's anytime coming soon. But as far as like us knowing, yeah, no. So here's the thing. The only way that we're going to know that there's a new coach in San Antonio is when he shows up for the press conference. That's the only way we're going to know. Like on opening day, like on opening night, a new coach will show up, like media day. That's when we'll know. And when Popovich passes away, hopefully many decades from now, because Pop's awesome. But whenever that day comes, the only way we will know is someone will accidentally stumble upon his grave. That's it. That's the only way we're going to know this. That's how the Spurs operate.
There are no leaks on the Gregg Popovich sailboat that he is sailing off into the sunset, as Hayes beautifully put it. I love that image, by the way, of Popovich on a sailboat into the sunset. I do think, I don't know if you guys agree with me on this, but like when Popovich does step away, I think there are going to be a lot of teams, maybe just a few teams that aren't nervous about their head coach leaving for an opportunity to coach Victor Wembanyama.
And as they should be. They should absolutely be. Because, listen, not only are you going to coach a generational player, but on top of that, you get to go to a franchise that just understands how to run functionally and intelligently. They absolutely should be afraid of that.
Also, it's not a market where you're going to be under a lot of pressure constantly. Like it's just a nice coaching job.
Okay, let's shift gears. Another big story out of the weekend was the NBA reopening an investigation into a 2021 domestic dispute incident involving then Pelicans, now Lakers center Jaxson Hayes after video of the events surfaced on TMZ in 2022. Hayes was sentenced to 3 years of probation, 450 hours of community service, and a year of weekly domestic violence classes. He was not punished at the time by the NBA. Here's Locked On Lakers with their take on the NBA taking a second look.
I think it's really important. If he did lie to them about anything, I think Jaxson Hayes is legitimately open to some form of punishment. And when I say some form of punishment, it's important to know that the league opted at the time never to discipline Jaxson Hayes. He has never been disciplined by the league. Unless Jaxson Hayes lied to the NBA or to the Lakers, if they punish him now for essentially the video coming out without learning any new information, that strikes me as the league and or the Lakers covering their own asses as opposed to really doing the right thing.
Okay, Hayes, what do you think about Andy's take there? Is this a CYA operation by the NBA taking a second look now that video has surfaced of the event?
I tell you what's the CYA operation. Why are on this episode there's so many people named Hayes that are in drama? Like this is
it
not
is
me.
a Hayes
It's
heavy
not me.
episode. There's no
it's
doubt
not
about
me.
that.
Oh, but I do. Yeah, I agree 100%. If nothing new comes out of this, if he told them and was completely honest and forthright about everything that happened in that situation, and they only have some type of disciplinary action because the video came out, that is definitely a cover your ass situation, in my opinion, because what more do you want from him? Now, if he lied about anything and that came out, then yeah, he deserves to go and get punished by the league. But if he did not, if he was 100% honest, and at this point it's just the video came out to the public, you've already made your decision not to punish him. To me, you can't go and turn around now and suspend him or something for something that he was honest about. Maybe that's just my opinion.
It's just more proof of how absolutely skin deep the NBA's policy on domestic violence is. Like, this is ridiculous that we're having this conversation. Did he lie? Did he not do this? The problem is that based off of the video evidence, if he was honest and they didn't suspend him, that's a problem. If he lied to them and they allowed him to lie to him and didn't pursue the means to actually know what happened, that's a problem for the league. Like, at some point, not just the NBA. And I want to stress this. This is not just an NBA problem. This is an NBPA problem, and they will not take responsibility for it. And I'm getting real sick of it. Between Miles Bridges and this, at some point, there's got to be different standards set for these things, because we keep acting like, oh yeah, the NBA has a zero tolerance policy. That's nonsense. And this is just another indication thereof.
No disagreement there. I agree with that point of it, is that the NBA, if they didn't know about this, and even if he was honest, like, that does raise some more questions that you did nothing at the time. So that's fair.
Other than a little bit of public criticism from Charles Barkley in the moment to Adam Silver on an episode of Inside the NBA, I'm just not sure like what the incentives are for the NBA to take a different path than they've chosen, which is a public relations path. If it's a public relations problem, they do something about it. If it's not, they don't. But I don't like who watches the watcher sort of situation. I'm not sure what's necessarily going to change about this until more people raise the public profile on this.
It's not even about the watching of the watcher. Like, think of it this way. All right, so there's all this pressure being applied. There's all this kind of notion. And then the Hornets just wait a year and are like, oh, yeah, we'll give Miles Bridges the bag because he's really good at basketball. And, like, that's the reality, is that when there's this much money on the line, everyone takes those options. Everyone chooses those instead of being like, no, that's, like, not what our organization stands for. We wouldn't do that. Like, consistently, we see this. Like, look how many guys, Kevin Porter Jr. is with the Clippers. Like, over and over again, these teams are choosing it, and the league is made up by the teams. Like, the league oversees the teams, but those teams are owned by Adam Silver's boss. Like, that's the thing. And so there's to me, this is going to have to start at an NBPA level and on the team level. Asking the league to be in charge and control of all of this, given the legal ramifications for them, is actually inaccurate. This is less of an NBA problem as it is about the players and the teams, and they need to own up to it.
Absolutely. And as I've covered this story a lot with Miles Bridges and the Charlotte Hornets, and I ask the same question every time we talk about this, is what is it going to take for the NBA to take this seriously? Because other leagues are taking this issue seriously, and other leagues are taking other issues like drunk driving more seriously after incidents occurred where people died. So what is it going to take for the NBA to take this seriously? Hopefully not that. Okay. You mentioned Adam Silver there. He is also teasing some All-Star game changes, and a Locked On host has a very interesting idea about what those changes should be. We'll see what Matt and Hayes think, and if they have their own ideas for All-Star game changes to make this thing a little bit more competitive and a little bit more fun to watch. That's all ahead on the Locked On NBA podcast. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can bet $5 and you get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, you can view live play-by-play, and so much more on the exact same page where you place your bets. And maybe you want to try to get that win on some props. We've got Patrick Mahomes 40-plus yards at -245. You've got Travis Kelce 10-plus yards at -152, 15-plus yards at +110. So a lot of different ways to win on FanDuel. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. More Locked On NBA ahead. Thanks for making Locked On NBA your first listen every day. There is a free daily Locked On podcast for your favorite NBA team. Just search your favorite podcast app or YouTube for Locked On and your favorite team today. So the NBA played in Mexico City this weekend, and Adam Silver was on hand and on mic for the occasion. In a sideline interview, the commish said that the NBA is evaluating changes for the All-Star game and All-Star weekend in consultation with Steph Curry. Maybe Adam should consult with Locked On Celtics host John Corrales, who has his own ideas for the game. Let's take a listen.
Not fun anymore. They've tried a couple of things. They tried the Elam ending. I like that. But even that's not happening. So here's my proposal. You expand the rosters to 15. I'm done with the 48-minute game. 15 players from the East, 15 players from the West. You have 6 teams now of 5. The top 6 vote getters are your captains, and you start picking teams. You play 5-on-5. I want to play full court. 5-on-5, game to 11. Winner holds the court. Winner keeps the court, just like you're playing outside, just like playground. You play to 11 straight up because you got people waiting. You play to a certain number. You play a little 5-on-5. You play quick games, and I think the competitive edge will be there because you're just trying to hold the court. So that's my solution for the All-Star game.
Okay, that's John's solution, going to sort of a playground model, quicker games, 5-on-5. What do you think of John's idea, Matt?
Look, I think John's getting creative. I think that's a good idea, like incorporating things like more of a street ball kind of concept. I think it could be cool. I think if you're going to do that, it'd be better to have some sort of outdoor arena, which is difficult in February when they hold this thing. So it's kind of tough to be able to get that kind of a vibe going. But the other thing here, I just think is like, look, we can deal with this, but the players have made it clear. They don't care. They're not going to try. There's no incentive for them. They're not going to try. There's no drawback for them. There's nothing negative. They talk about like, man, we got to fix this game. And then they're the ones that go out there and dog it. And it's fine. We just got to give up on this, man. If you go to All-Star, most of those seats are taken up by corporate sponsors and partners. It's not a great atmosphere. These are not real fans in the building for the most part. They've been priced out. You don't create anything that's actually like a legitimate basketball game. Like if you want to get into this kind of concept, like I like the idea of actually getting guys that want to play that are like, yeah, no, it's me. Like imagine the Knicks being like, yeah, we're getting 5 Villanova dudes and we're going to go actually play. That's a cool concept. I like all these ideas because the best thing about All-Star Weekend is it's a celebration of basketball. Saturday and the events in the city. My favorite one, honestly, I've been to outside of New Orleans, because New Orleans is always the best, is Chicago, Hayes. Because Chicago, when they hosted it, it was a genuine celebration of basketball. You felt it in the streets. It was awesome. But there's no way to fix this, man. It's too broken. I also think the league needs to give up at this point. I'd rather All-Star Weekend just be like hey, we'll have some fan events and everyone can take the weekend off. I'm tired of trying to fix this thing.
There's no fixing it because to Matt's point, like as long as the players don't care, you can throw and it's a great idea by John. That's not to crap on John's idea at all, but it takes one thing into consideration. To hold the court, you have to actually care about being on the court. These players don't care. So no, it's not going to fix any. There's nothing and no way that you can fix this All-Star game until the players actually give a damn about the All-Star game. And that's ship. If you listen to how kind of the younger class now in the NBA views the All-Star game, it almost seems like they don't even care about being there. They just want to get it done, get it over with. They care about hanging out with their friends for a weekend and being able to be on that stage and move on. The players don't care. And eventually the fans just have to give up, and we just have to stop caring as well, because as long as the players, the guys on that court that are technically competing don't care, it's just a crap show. That's all it is. It's just a horse and pony show.
Well, what do you think about the idea that they lean more into the, Steph versus Sabrina type of mini game aspect of this and just wipe away the game completely? I think there would be, I don't know how many, but I think there would be a lot of fans that would be disappointed that all of those previous All-Star game records and All-Star game MVPs, all of a sudden they lose a little bit of meaning if you're no longer playing the game, right?
I mean, I think that that's unfortunate for those fans. I just don't know that the overall impact, because look at the overall impact here. The overall impact is the league makes a lot of money for a bad product and they lose reputation. And like that to me is the reality is like, I'm very curious to know, the new media rights deals and who's going to, like, I assume ESPN's going to retain, but like who wanted this? Was Prime like, oh yeah, we'd love to host the All-Star game? Cause I'm going to bet that they were more like, we would love to have the cup. That's probably how that worked out, because those are actually competitive games. Until they can kind of solve this, I get that people want to retain that history, but we've got a lot of history that's changed throughout the NBA, and I think we can afford to lose this if the players are simply going to make it not a priority.
Hayes, have you thought about this at all? Do you have any kind of idea that even on replacing the All-Star game, what would you replace it with? They've got to find something.
I do like the more competitive nature of like Steph versus Sabrina. That was fun to watch from like a basketball standpoint. But then again, I know so many so many NBA fans that aren't WNBA fans, even though that league is growing. They should be WNBA fans, by the way, that just didn't really understand the magnitude of that moment. It was a fun thing to watch. It's like a novelty thing. So I honestly, I'm not that creative, or maybe I'm just the fan base as well, who's just over All-Star Weekend. Like the dunk contest, there's nothing about All-Star Weekend to me anymore that's like appointment television. It used to be that. And I don't know how you regain that, because for me, I used to be so ingrained in All-Star Weekend. Now, honestly, I just look at it as All right, I'll turn it on if nothing else is on TV that weekend.
3-on-3 tournament all day Sunday. Finals from non-all-stars. Finals before the game. You make the game 20 minutes. Get them in and out of there.
I think you find ways to incorporate international players. I think you find ways, maybe it's going to be difficult to get any amateur players involved, but some guys from G League for sure, to inject a little competition, inject a little heat.
If you want to fix the dunk contest, get the G League in. Every single year I've gone, when I've gone to the G League dunk contest, they're always the best. I've seen things people will not like. It's like seeing aliens. People would not believe what I've seen at these G League dunk contests. They're so good.
Just clone Mac McClung. Just clone him and have 3 Mac McClungs, triple Mac, go at it. They've got the technology. They're hiding it.
I think also, like, if you're talking about like the other events, like if you bring in some street ballers from around the U.S. around the country and put them in the dunk contest, you can absolutely make that. Like Bulls Fest, the Chicago Bulls host a summer festival every year, and they invite some of the best street dunkers from around the city for that, and it's head and shoulders above the dunk contest every single year.
Make it a celebration of basketball. That's the key. Is everything needs to be a celebration of basketball.
Exactly. And listen, they've tried a lot of incentives, right? They've tried money. They've tried letting them pick teams and like kind of force in rivalries. Nothing has worked, but there is one thing left that they haven't tried. So here's my final idea. If you want to save the All-Star game, 48 minutes, you still play the game. My idea is floor is lava, that portions of the court are filled with molten lava. That's right. Lives are on the line at this point. What's the ultimate motivator for human beings? It is to live. It is to survive.
The problem with that, Doug, is somebody's going to flop and then they're dead. Like, that's what's going to happen.
Oh, yeah. Chris Paul is not participating, by the way. Chris Paul is like, all right,
man, the body count with Giannis on the floor.
Could you imagine the complaining Luka Doncic is going to do it if the floor is actually, I'm sorry, Nick, but if the floor was actually lava? Come on, man.
All right. Let us know what you think on YouTube. You can hit us up in the comments. Let us know what your ideas are for fixing the All-Star game, the eternal conversation, it feels like, at least over the past decade. If you like what you heard today, make sure you subscribe to Locked On NBA wherever you get podcasts, including on YouTube. Check out Locked On NBA Game Nights after the games. We are recapping all of the games with our Locked On NBA experts. Thanks for making Locked On NBA your first listen. Enjoy tonight's action. Be kind to each other, and we will see you right back here on Tuesday's edition of Locked On NBA.